Thank you everyone for joining Black Women Speak, Unchained and Uncensored. This is going to be a powerful discussion that's taking place today on Tuesday, June 9th, 2020 from 6:30 p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. We have an exceptional panelist, and it's going to be an awesome conversation that these phenomenal Black women are going to have tonight. So I want to thank you ladies for joining. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you all here. And also thank you for the listeners as well who are chiming into this discussion this evening. I want to thank you all for joining. And we have an incredible moderator who will be moderating this conversation, and her name is Anne-Marie Knight. Anne-Marie Knight is the new acting director of the Black Business Alliance and the owner of Shine Consulting and Training LLC, empowering nonprofit organizations so they can make an impact in their communities. She feels that her most important work, besides raising her children, is helping others make deep transformational change, which is why she has facilitated diversity trainings and assembly programs with the Anti-Defamation League for 18 years, impacting thousands of students, faculty, and businesses throughout the Northeast. Let's give a round of applause for Anne-Marie Knight. All right. So Anne-Marie Knight, thank you so much for facilitating this conversation. Really greatly appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Listen, thank you all so much, all of you powerful women this evening. I am really, really looking forward to the conversation that we are going to be having tonight. And it is just a privilege, and I'm honored to be in your presence this evening. So we've come together this evening to really create the space, create an opportunity for us to come together in community and for us to have a chance to listen deeply to each other. I think that's so important in this moment, in this time where we are in this country, in this time where we are in this world. We need to have an opportunity to speak and be able to listen deeply to each other. So today, this is really going to be our opportunity to reflect, right? To plan, strategize, and to mobilize. And I love that part because, like many of you, we've had enough talking, and it's time for us also to move towards some form of action. So I'm looking forward to hearing all of your input, share your heart, share your stories, share your experiences this evening, and know that we are listening. We're taking it in, we're listening, we're breathing with you this evening. And I think it's even more important tonight as I reflect on the fact that today was George Floyd's memorial service. And so just before we even get started, I'm just going to ask if we could just take a moment of silence just to remember that. Thank you, ladies. I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce ourselves to the audience and just give your brief introductions. Tell us who you are, where you're from, a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you hope to gain this evening. All right. Stephanie, can I start with you?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanye Clarke. I am a program officer at the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut. I am a member of the Health Improvement Collaborative of Southeastern Connecticut, where I chair the Black Health Collective. I am an agitator, an advocate, a gatekeeper, and New London. I'm a transplant to New London, but I've been here most of my life. And I am hopeful that tonight we'll have great conversation about like what's happening with us right now, like in this sister circle space, thinking about ways that we can heal as we have to navigate all of these systems that come together to continue to cause injury and reimagine what those look like.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Miss Lottie, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Lottie B. Scott, and I hail from Longtown, South Carolina, and living in Norwich. My professional experiences, I worked for the Connecticut Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities for many, many years. I was a regional manager, and then after retiring, I own a business dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace. So I also wrote Deep South, Deep North. And I would like to add my voice to making things different and to bringing peace and justice for all in America.
Thank you so much. Miss Seanice.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Seanice Austin. I live in New London, Connecticut, born and raised, however, in New York City. I work for the University of Connecticut, and I head up the diversity office for the UConn School of Business. I'm just excited to be here amongst all of you, sharing our stories, but also looking forward toward just coming up with solutions and ideas and moving towards some progress. I think the time is now, and I'm just excited to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Miss Maman.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maman Cooper. A little bit of myself. I am a Hartford resident. I've lived here for 17 years now. And I went back to UConn. I went to UConn. I was a graduate 2017. And ever since then, hello. Ever since then, I've been back in Hartford, and I work as an educator here. I taught for a couple of years, but now I work as a student support, academic support service. And, you know, I really got involved in activism back at UConn when I was running the NAACP there. So ever since then, I've not really been involved in the community in terms of activism. And with everything that's happening, I keep wondering, how do I get involved again? How do I help with the cause and the movement? So that's why I'm here. I'm really happy to be able to hear the different ways that we can all collaborate with each other to get things done.
Wonderful. I'm glad you got to join us this evening. Miss Venice.
Hi, good evening. My name is Venice Moore. I am from the Bronx, New York, and I've lived in Connecticut for about 10 years. I am the owner of Embracing Your Difference, which is a private practice and motivational firm. And I'm a therapist, and I do see a lot of clients who are suffering from depression, anxiety, and trauma. And I am delighted to be here, unfortunately, for the reasons that we are, but just to share the space and to talk a little bit about what I can add to this wonderful space right here. And as a mom of 3 boys, and a therapist who wants to break patterns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Taliah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Taliah Fletcher. I'm born and raised in New London, Connecticut. I'm a hairstylist here in the city, and I'm also a mother, most importantly, of 4 Black boys. So the reason why I'm here is as a voice. You know, my heart just cries out for the mothers in the community, but mothers all across the world. The reason why I'm here is because I'm just sick and tired of racism and violence, preferably in the police force. So hopefully we could come up with a plan or strategize into how do we dismantle this system of white supremacy, period.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Taliah. Miss Regina.
Peace, everyone. My name is Regina Mosley. I want to greet everyone on the Zoom chat in peace, and everyone that may be watching Facebook Live in peace. I greet everyone in peace because it's a universal greeting. For my culture, this means the absence of confusion. So what I do in the way that I lead my life every day is to speak the truth, right? And sometimes people don't necessarily like the truth. And those that know me in the community know that I'm good at calling people out and holding people accountable, just as I want my community to hold me accountable. I am the president of the New London Board of Education, and tonight I'm going to be speaking on behalf of myself, not on behalf of the full board, although the ideas that we discuss, especially surrounding education, I definitely want to take back to the superintendent and the rest of the district, because I feel like diversity and inclusion is important, and it's something that we're lacking in our education system. Peace.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. Miss Reona, I know you're on mute, but can you unmute yourself and just introduce yourself? I know we'll see you later.
Good evening. My name is Reona Dyess, and my daytime job is Executive Director of the Drop and Learning Center, which have been in this community for over 50 years. This month, the month of June, I'm also City Council here in New London, and I'm just here in respect to all these women, and I can't wait to listen to what they have to share with their experience. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. So let's jump into it. This is our opportunity to really share our hearts this evening. And I wanted to start by asking you, as Black women, I want you to be able to share and talk about how it feels to be in this situation right now. How are you? How does it feel spiritually, emotionally, spiritually for you as we're going through? Not only have we kind of come into COVID-19, and then we add on all of this racial prejudice and injustice and the murder. Tell me what's on your heart, how you're feeling, how you're doing now. And I'll let anyone who'd like to answer can jump in now.
I'm glad you asked that question, because the first week I just found myself crying. As a mother, a grandmother, great-grandmother, and have seen abuses from an early age in my childhood. When I was just a little girl, I had to witness brutality by whites. And to come and find ourselves at this time, with my being 83 years old, just let you know, thinking in terms of how far have we come. It seems that we've come a long ways, but it certainly is not enough. And it certainly is not justice for all. And we have so much work to be done. And it seems that it's forever, we are forever pushing hard. And when are we going to be able to rest? Until victory, and how are we going to get there?
Thank you for sharing. It has been a long struggle, and for some a lot longer than ours. And I can relate to the tears and just feeling tired and worn out. But let me hear from you. Ms. Stephanye, you look like you've got yours unmuted.
Yes. So I started to qualify how I'm feeling with in this moment. So right here, right now, I'm okay. But I spend a lot of time in the cycle of rage, profound sadness, and then numbness, and a bit of hopelessness. And then something will happen. I'll get like a little nugget of joy. I'll be on some super inspiring webinar like today, 2 of them. But for the most part, it's been that hamster wheel of emotions. But right now, in this moment, I'm okay. Just because I'm focused on something else. And even though we're gonna talk about all the heavy stuff, I'm all right, because I'm not alone in this space right now.
Yes, I hear you. Thank you. Would anybody else like to add to that? Go ahead, Seanice.
I'm so glad that we started that first question and Miss Lottie was the first one to answer it, because it speaks to the history of our country and the history of Black people here in this country. My heart goes out to our elders, because they have to be sick and tired. If we sick and tired, they have to be sick and tired of this process. And, you know, I feel just hearing Miss Lottie speak makes me even more determined that we push through, that this is our time, because there's no way that our elders should be experiencing and reliving this again.
Yes. Yes.
I also want to share that Gen Z, this is the group, the young people today that are leading this moment. They are fierce, they are bold, and unapologetic. And I feel so proud of them. And, and I feel emboldened by them, and I'm learning from them. And I'm just ready to move forward. Change is now, change is coming. And so that's where I'm at right now.
If you're watching this live, you may not be able to see or hear some of the clicks and the hand claps that we're all in agreement with that. Thank you. I think Miss Regina, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to come at you from a different perspective, and everybody on the screen can see that I am light skinned, right? So I fight a different fight, and I know this talk isn't about colorism, but I have some people that come to me in the, not in this circle, but in other avenues of life that tell me that I can't relate to the struggle of Black people because of the color of my skin, not realizing that I am Black and Native American.
Wow.
Wow.
Regina,
I lost some of your sound there. I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to come right back to you, Regina.
Oh.
All right.
Okay.
Miss Taliah, can you add what you wanted to add, please?
Yes. So at this moment, at this season, 2 weeks ago, I was feeling depressed. I had a little anxiety. I was waking up crying, checking on my boys and everything. But at this moment right now, I feel a little bit differently. I feel like we are regaining our power. Like in the season that Black people are in right now, we are building up our momentum through the young people because they are unapologetically Black, and they're the way they move is different. They're gonna tell you the reason why, but it's a shame, like Miss Lottie said, that things haven't changed too much. I do appreciate Martin Luther King and their march, because now we have to make a global movement to say, hey, our life matters. Hey, let us breathe as humans. Hey, don't treat us like we are property anymore. We are actually valued. That's disgusting at the same time. But, I feel like we're in war, but I also feel like there's going to be peace to our storm real soon, that this has to happen.
I feel that hope too. And I heard Miss Lottie say, the question was, how much more? How much more do we have to take? How much further do we have to go with this? And I feel like we're in that kind of perfect storm, if you would say, with COVID and people being shut down and at home, and then having this incident layered on top of it is what causes people to have to stop and really take a good look in a way we wouldn't have been able to before, not just because things are on video nowadays, but because we're always so busy and moving and nobody's paying attention. So this is a real opportunity. So I feel that sense of hope that you're talking about as well. I feel the impact on you as individuals. Let's bring it into a discussion about our families. What has been the impact on the young people, the children? I'm a mother too. I have grandchildren. I've had to try to navigate this discussion with, from an 8-year-old grandson to a 14-year-old grandson. These are tough discussions. Talk to me about how you're navigating those discussions with your loved ones, the youth that you work with, and maybe even your own children. Go ahead, Maman.
So I don't have kids, and it's insane because during this time, I think about how grateful I am to not have kids, And, you know, as a young 26 years old, my mom, who is African, has been telling me, you need to have kids, it's time. And, you know, something like this happened. I wonder, do I want to have kids? You know, it's really a tough thing to navigate, because I can imagine having a child is so much investment, right? You spend so many years taking care of that child, feeding that child, and doing all these things for the child, and thousands of millions of dollars go through that. And then to have your child eventually be killed on the streets as though they don't even have any dignity. So for me, in that instance, it has me questioning, do I want to ever have kids? But then I work with students. And last week, I had to have this conversation with my students. And it was a difficult conversation, even though it was about half an hour, but it felt really difficult because what do I tell these kids, you know? Last time they come to the classroom, we help them with their homework, they get their assignments done, and we tell them, you know, get your homework done, do this and that, and you're gonna be great. But then it's like there's that piece of hoping that you don't get shot by a police officer, or hoping that you don't get shot by someone who's just pure racist, and that will, something as simple as you taking a jog will shoot you because the skin of your color automatically makes you some type of a threat. So it was very difficult having a conversation with the students, and I have nieces and nephews that I still have to have a conversation with. And for my family in particular, we've not really had this conversation. And part of that is because I am African, and my dad and my sister, they're still like, well, we're Africans, you know, there's kind of that distinction, like, well, we're African. It's like, no, when you walk on the street and I'm gonna go, wait, are you African or not? You know, like at the end of the day, brown skin, dark skin, you're a victimized already. So it's been a lot of conversation with my friends and, you know, my students, but not with my family in particular.
All right, thank you. Ms. Seanice.
So I have two children. They're both adults. My son is 31, my daughter is 27. This time has been really phenomenal in terms of how I am interacting with my children, because they're young adults, so we can have real conversations. We talk about what is going on. I'll tell you guys a quick story. My daughter went to New London High School. She was senior class president. And so she was giving the graduation speech as a part of her role of being the class president. And they had a teacher in high school that there was some kind of political issue going on at the school, but the students loved this teacher. The administration did not want my daughter to mention this teacher in her speech. And so I don't know if you guys remember last year, there was a video that went around where this young woman was giving a commencement speech and they cut her mic off. Yes. They had threatened my daughter that if she mentioned this teacher and gave the speech that she had written, that she would not receive her diploma from New London High School. This came from the principal and the superintendent. And so again, I'm being a generation older than her. I'm telling my daughter, you know, revise your speech. You know, we want you to graduate. You worked so hard for this. My child got up there on that stage and gave her damn speech. What were they gonna do, she said? What were they gonna do? They didn't cut the mic. And I was so proud of her in that moment. And with that, and I see her and my son, the conversations that we have now, they're rebels and they're fighters. And so that's what our relationship is like right now. And it's really a great thing to see. I'm learning from her, she's learning from me, we're learning from each other. So it's been really great.
I appreciate that. The young ones really are leading the way. And that's so amazing to be a part of and to watch and just to join together in this moment. Ms. Venice, you might have missed the beginning of this, but I really wanted to include you in this conversation. We were talking about the impact of everything that's happening, to me, trauma on our communities, but particularly on the young people, the children, our families, the kids. How are we speaking to them? How are we having conversations? Can you give some insight there for us, please?
Yes, yes. And my apologies, gotta love technology, right? My phone, my computer, internet just went out. But I did want to just say that I know your first question was how was we feeling, and now you're on another question. And I can speak to both at this point because, like, you know, as a therapist, I can say that I've been disheartened because, of course, sitting in the chair, serving and supporting clients, I'm still a wife and a mom too, you know, and we've been known to just, you know, be so strong all the time. That's just, you know, what we do, right? And at the end of the day, I've had to listen and support and put in, like, okay, we have to develop some coping skills here. Traumas coming up from just like years ago with other clients. And then I come home and, you know, my kids have questions. I have a 12-year-old son and he's been confused, and we've had to have conversations, some real conversations with him. And I'm seeing a lot of my clients now are seeking out services for their children as well. Even though they're having the conversations at home, they're seeing that their children just need additional support, not just only because of what's going on within our Black community, but then also during COVID. So it's just like double pretty much. So I would say the disheartening piece for me is because it really does start at home. We know that our children are born so pure. They are born to love. They are born to embrace. And they are one with God just like us. And what I'm seeing in this world is showing me that households all over the world, no matter what race you are, it's just the racism is there, and it starts from home. So I just encourage all parents to really think about that. Think about what you're showing your children, what you're saying to them, what you're not saying to them. And of course, what you are doing when you don't think they're watching, because they're sponges. So even when you're in a grocery store and you see, you know, I'm speaking of just like different races, you see other people, and if you act a certain way, your children are watching. Yeah. So I think I went on a tangent, but it's just been a lot. It's been a lot.
No, I think you're bringing up some really important points. And I think, you know, things like watching too much of the news, absorbing that hour after hour. And if you're absorbing that hour after hour and not keeping in mind that your kids are behind you watching you, you're exactly right. And then in anger and frustration, things get said too, and not remembering who's watching. So I think that you make some really, really good points. I'm glad you brought that up. So I wanted to kind of turn the dialogue slightly and have us think about, you know, so much of this is based on inequities that have been a part of our communities for so long. So we can talk about education, we can talk about health disparities, we can talk about, we haven't even touched on like Black business and how the economy is impacted. But I'm wondering if we just try to think about some of those in specific areas. So we already know that COVID-19 was having a disproportionately affected our Black and Brown communities. We were already aware of that. We were already aware of the high number of deaths that were happening in our communities, folks who were not leaving their home, even they were sick enough, needed to go to the hospital and didn't go and get the care. We were already aware of the impact in our community. And then let's talk about how those major health disparities are impacting us. And what do we do now to address those disparities? But I also want to keep in mind that, you know, we have to be aware, we are aware that there's, intersectionality, right? So there's layers of things that connect together and layer on top of each other. So the education touches, the economy touches, but let's just focus on the health situation for a moment. What can we do to address some of those root causes? Let's get down to it now around the health issues. And I see that's your thing, Ms. Stephanye. Come on.
So I'm gonna ask in advance that you forgive me if you see me looking down, because I have this thing full of stickies of notes that I wanted to make sure that I touch on. So a couple things. When we started hearing the data around how COVID-19 is disproportionately impacting Black folks, that's kind of where I'm focused today. I know that it's people of color, but I'm focused on Black folks today. The headlines were alarming numbers and this is shocking. And I got so annoyed every time I sort of heard that narrative, because I was like, it's not though. It's not alarming. It's not shocking. It is a continuum. Like it's just another thing that you can add on if you think about health disparities in general, right? Yeah. And I love how the question was framed about addressing root causes. And so I think it's important to name some of the root causes, right? So some of these social determinants of health, which is essentially public health geek speak for the conditions that folks into which we're born, we live, we work, we worship, learn, play, and pray, and how those influence our health outcomes. So some of those things, right, are like socioeconomic status, education, access to transportation, employment, housing, healthy food options, environmental hazards, things of that nature, right? And so typically what happens in these conversations is we're so laser focused on health behaviors, right? So as I was thinking about the question tonight, I was like, oh, well, you know, I'm a part of this health improvement collaborative, and we just finished this community health needs assessment. So I'm going to dazzle them and I'm going to share all of the statistics and all the numbers, but we're familiar. We know what it looks like, right? So, and I don't want us to get stuck solely on the health behaviors, because like if I say, well, this percentage of folks Black folks have diabetes, report having diabetes and hypertension, whatever little numbers that I was thinking about throwing out there, folks will say, well, why don't they just exercise more? Why don't they just eat healthier? And why don't they go to the doctor more? And what is missing in that is the bigger piece. When you look at all of those different systems, all of those different things that influence our health, and how they were designed and set up, right? And so it's like, well, Black people don't do this. And so really quick, race isn't the issue. Racism is the issue. And so I was on a webinar today with my public health shiro, Dr. Kamara Jones, and I had already written down her definition of racism, which is how I frame it and how I frame like all the work that I do. And essentially she says it's a system that assigns opportunity and value to folks based on the social interpretation of how we look, right? And so when we consider that, she says that it unfairly advantages and unfairly disadvantages individuals and communities, right? So as we think about these health disparities and these inequities, we have to think about the things I listed, right? Like how racism is, how it shows up in our healthcare system, how racism shows up in access to healthier food options, how racism shows up in housing, right? So all of the things, right? So, so it's our responsibility to make sure that we address those social determinants of health through the lens of racism and specifically, right, in terms of this conversation, racism as anti-Blackness, right? Because we know that other folks experience racism, but we want to make sure that we continue to remember that at the root of all of our governing institutions was the notion that we were less than, and our movement and everything about us had to be monitored and hindered, right? So all of that stuff is rooted in anti-Blackness. We need to make sure that we consider racism as we or anti-racism, excuse me, as we are working towards designing, reimagining, and designing systems, all of them, in a way that are equitable, like, and all of their policies, the laws, policies, and practices. If we don't consider how it impacts them now, then we won't redesign things with that lens, and we're just gonna have more of what we already have. Make sure that we're collecting real good data, right? So anyone who was watching on Facebook Live, who was like in public health or health equity, like Health Equity Solutions, as an example, is an organization who has been pushing the state to mandate standardized collection of race, ethnicity, and language data. The fact that they even have to be suggesting that that be a thing and standardized is trash. The fact that it won't get pushed through, trash. So it's up to us to make sure that we are calling and emailing our legislators and pushing for that, because that's the stuff that matters. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox. Just give me a couple more minutes.
Go ahead.
We need to make sure that we center these conversations, our interventions, proposed legislation, and everything on the voices of the people who are greatest impacted by all of this stuff, right? So for the Department of Public Health to say, well, we're gonna fund this thing, and this is the way that you should do it, with if it has to do with like improving cardiovascular health of Black residents in Connecticut, or improving maternal and child health for Black women and babies. Yes. If that is done without actually speaking to the folks who are living with these things, these women who are experiencing racism and microaggressions every single day of their lives, and they're doing what they can to bring forth healthy babies, but the babies are born low, with a low birth weight, and the Black mothers are dying. If we are not having that conversation, then I don't want to hear anything you're saying. If we don't center what we are doing, then we are missing an opportunity. I swear I'm almost done. I'm a preacher's kid, so I might be here a while. Let's see. Oh, yeah, so centering the voices, that's really important, right? Because there are lots of problems within our community, but I don't want to get stuck there, right? Because we also have the solution. It is up to our leaders, our local leaders. Mm-hmm. So make sure you're holding them accountable too. Don't just think it's important to vote this year because it's a presidential election. Mm-hmm. Make sure in 2 years, when the city councilors and board of ed people are up, get out to vote. Like, all of these things are important. So we need to be making sure that we are centering all of our solutions and all of our conversations and everything we do on these voices.
Hold your thought 1 second there, Stephanie.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe Maman and Venice are reacting to some of what you said already. So let me hear your voice.
Okay.
No, I actually just was just snapping at the maternal piece and the patterns, and just knowing how there's people who could assume that maternal piece and the statistics in that, and then speak about even like postpartum depression, and it's just so much that goes along with this. And for me, one thing that I will say, because even in my office now, I do like postpartum scales, because I've had new moms come in. My youngest is 1, so I totally get it, and it goes back to that we're supposed to be strong, so they're okay. But a lot of times between 0 and 18 months, especially for our Black moms and moms in the urban communities and our minority moms, it takes at least 18 months for you to get back to feeling somewhat normal, somewhat back to where you were prior to giving birthing a human out of your body. So I've seen like even more of a depression when it comes to those moms, but I've also seen a lot of one group is postpartum group in I think West Hartford, but I don't really see a lot of minorities working there. So to give the perspective, and moms are moms, you know. However, we have gone through some different things. So I think it's just important, and I've seen, you know, more doctors' office give those scales, and I've been appreciative of that because I've seen it more, but there's still so much more that needs to come along with that. So that's why I was snapping, and thank you.
Thank you, Maman.
For me, two major things, and one of them is the blaming. Well, they should work out more. They should do this more. They should do that more. And you know, sometimes it's not people's fault that they don't know all the different layers that impact a person for not being able to have a good health, for example, right? Like I tell myself, eat less meat, but then I now go to the grocery store. It's much cheaper to buy meat and make a big meal than to eat seafood or to eat vegetables. So people typically don't really understand the different layers that impact a person's ability to make, I guess, better decisions, right? And not to get all education about it, but I think that's part of the issue with the education system. We don't really teach from the beginning. They don't teach the holistic of what things should be taught. Is more of you sit in the classroom, you learn this and that, and then you're all set. But it's how do you know to connect the dots? Like, oh wait, this person is not able to eat healthier because of economic reasons, because you know this mother has to go to work and then she has these kids. There's all these layers that impact that, right? But how can someone who just goes to school, ace their quiz or ace their test, how can they learn that? So sometimes, and you know, one of the reasons I'm here today is because I always believe that meaningful conversations and really having heart-to-heart conversation is part of where the change starts. And people are not going to be able to learn these things about the different obstacles if they're not having conversation, because schools are not teaching it. I mean, I taught for a couple of years and I realized that, I'm sorry, like I told my students all the time, yeah, after you leave class, you should go and really educate yourself, because I have a curriculum to follow, but sadly, this is not really going to teach you what you need for life. So that's one thing I was snapping at. And then the second thing is people who you want to talk about, you know, their health, right? People who you want to educate. If they're not involved, how are you actually bringing on board policies and different things that actually represent that are going to help them? That can never be done unless the people who you're actually serving are involved. So that's another major thing to start.
Absolutely, to Stephanie's point, absolutely. Stephanie, did you have one more thing you wanted to add?
I do. I promise I'll be quick. All right. So yes to all of that. And the point you made about educating folks about connecting the dots, I feel like that's also an indictment on our healthcare system, right? And our providers, right? So they'll say, well, you need to do this, you need to do this, and you need to do this. And they don't have the opportunity and maybe the time to really explore that person holistically. As you mentioned, right? Like I want you to walk more, but you can't tell me to just walk around my neighborhood more if you don't know the neighborhood I live in, right? You can't tell me to buy all of these healthy things if there are literally no healthy options around me, right? So two things. I know that a lot of the reason we came together tonight was sort of driven by a lot of the police brutality and that sort of racial violence. And I just want us to make sure that we consider the racial violence and all of these other systems in housing, in education, in health. And the last thing, I swear that I'm gonna be quiet for the rest of the night, is Seanice made mention of the fact that how inspired we all are by our young folks. I watch them, I read what they're saying, and I'm snapping and I'm supporting. And so we need to continue to create space for our young folks, to listen to them, to support them, and then have them co-design the solutions, right? And not just say, we have this table and we're gonna invite you here, but shh, that's garbage. And they're not even here for any of that. They will shut us down. So it's really important that we are inclusive, and I really don't like that word, but we really need to be intentional about including our young folks.
Excellent point. Go ahead, Seanice.
I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about the other, one of the other pieces to the racial disparities pie, and that's education. So we have a few educators here on the call, and we've all have gone through the system, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed. And the racial and the educational disparities very much mirror the health disparities. What COVID-19 has shown us is that America has been caught with its pants down in terms of education. We are the wealthiest country in the world, and we have just shown the rest of the world that we are not prepared in all of the disparities that we see in education. And we need to fix it. But as Stephanie mentioned, fixing it does not come with folks that have been in the system coming up with solutions in their own solo space. As I mentioned, I work in higher ed, and there is now this push from many of my colleagues to now make change. They want to have meetings and let's come up with solutions and ideas. And I basically have told them, pump your brakes.
Yep.
Pump your brakes, because you have been the director, the deans, the presidents of these universities for X amount of years, and you have not come up with any, substantive solutions. We need to hold up. You need to listen, communicate. Last week, if you had all of these ideas, you were not implementing them. Last year, you were not implementing these ideas. Pump your brakes and let's hear from the folks that are leading this movement. Let's bring in new ideas. And the other thing that I've been sharing in terms of education is maybe the folks that are currently in leadership are not the right fit to be leading this moment right now. And that maybe part of your role is to look at others that can be leaders. That could be part of your role, is to elevate and amplify other voices. So that's what I've been sharing, and I've been very direct. Part of my conversations will always start with, can I be frank? Can I be honest? Because I'm just tired of the politics, and we just, we need to get to real solutions.
Again, I think that this is a moment for these conversations to come forward, because I've been having a number of these kind of pump your brakes discussions myself these last few weeks. So, I mean, we all hear you. It takes an awful lot of, it's not just, you have to be able to really take a good look at yourself to be able to say, I want to be intentional about stepping back and elevating those voices. And I think that there are folks who just do not have that capacity. So I think the more we speak up, the more that we're saying it, the more that we're raising those flags, I think that's what will encourage this conversation to keep going. So I just am thrilled with what you said. Go ahead, Taliah.
I have more of a question, since we have, people in the healthcare on the panel. So when I think of healthcare, and Black people, I think of space. So how can we create a space where Black people are comfortable going to the doctor? That's number one. We came into this country being experimented on, what I'm saying? So there's a fear there when it comes to, are they gonna harm me? Are they suggesting the right medications to us? Should we actually go and see a Black doctor? Because the bottom line, I feel, is that our bodies are just made up differently. So what you may suggest to someone else may not work for me. So I feel like when you're dealing with COVID-19, there's a lot of people, I'm looking at the news like, okay, y'all coming up with all these numbers, but there's a lot of people who are suffering, not dying, but suffering at their house due to not even getting tested and not going to the hospital, because we're seeing that we're being killed in the hospital, or different things is happening to Black people. So there's a fear there. So getting back to what I was saying is just, how can we open up that safe space where Black people can feel comfortable in going to the hospital and getting medicated or getting what they need?
Great question. Great question.
So I don't have all of the answers. because I have my own issues with the healthcare system based on the history, right? And so as a personal example, like when my doctor tried to prescribe me something, I asked her these questions, and I'm sure she was mortified and completely annoyed. I didn't really care. I said, will I grow a horn? And she said, what? And I'm like, will I grow a horn? And she said, no. And I said, are you sure? And so she didn't have an answer for that. I said, will I have, I was asking her about all these random deformities. And then I said, is there something else that I could do personally so that I don't have to take this particular medicine, right? But not everyone is comfortable sort of speaking up, because a lot of us have been sort of socialized to not question the authority of folks. So there's a lot to it, and I've taken up so much space tonight. I don't want to do it all, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline about all of my thoughts about the system in general.
Thank you, Stephanie. Go ahead, Venice.
I would say for me, when it comes to not wanting to go to the doctor, that fear for me, I would say comes from some place. That fear comes from what we've been taught and what we've experienced, the things we've gone through, being ignored a lot in certain situations, certain doctor's appointments, or just seeing loved ones suffer after they have gone to the doctor numerous times and not receiving, the results that we thought. So that fear, from a therapeutic and spiritual perspective, I would say needs to be looked upon, because the answers are out there. And I think one thing that Maman said is communicating with each other, because there is a doctor out there who may get it. There is another friend who may be able to direct you to someone else, not to sit in the fear, but try to move in a direction of looking to your left and to your right, or looking for some sort of resources with the people that you do trust. It's starting from a place of distrust. Because for me, I was looking for a while. I'm not from Connecticut, but I really needed to have, an OB who knew me, who knew my body. And when I found one, I was so grateful, because when I gave birth to my third son, she saved my life. Literally, I passed out, and it was her who came in as, an amazing African-American doctor who just took everything by the horn, moved everybody to the side, and said, this is what she needed. She told me 3 weeks prior, and the other doctors didn't. She said, you need to make sure you focus on this, this, and this, because if you don't, I'm telling you, something is wrong with your bloodstream, or something like that, what she was telling me. So, and I will never forget that, because I've heard different stories from the situation that I was in at the time. So I would just encourage you to please just reach out to those people that you do trust, or do some research, or just try to figure out how you could release that fear and reach out to somebody who may have the answers, because they're out there. They're out there.
You're on mute.
I've got it. Thank you. Deepening the dialogue, broadening the dialogue is key. And
You're on mute.
For many of us, we're more invested in complementary therapies and natural remedies, and many doctors just are not aware of those kinds of things. So I think including that too. Stephanie, go ahead.
I also wanted to make sure that, from an advocacy lens, for those safe spaces, right? There was legislation that was on this session that just went away, where they were trying to establish a doula advisory council. So in terms of Black maternal health and things of that nature, making sure that there's not only this certified process to get them certified, but also making sure that our doulas and our community health workers, folks who we know and trust within our communities, are able to be present and with us and paid for by the insurers.
Yes, good point. Now, one of the things I regret about when we get together in this space and we're having these kinds of conversations and this type of dialogue, we want to be able to go deeper and further and extend it much more, but time is not on our side. And I really hope that this is just the beginning of a dialogue, that we continue to have this dialogue, and that's how we move towards action. So I do want to switch really quickly, and I know this is kind of a hard switch, but
You're muted.
got it. Sorry. I want us to be able to talk about the violence in our community and talk about police brutality. What can be done? Like, what are the next steps? I think you've already covered some of it in terms of leadership, having our voices be a part of the solutions. But what else are your thoughts around the violence, police brutality, police departments? What are your thoughts there?
I think Miss Lottie has something to say.
Miss Lottie?
She did it herself.
Yes. I would just say that you certainly need reforming because it's been having problems have been a long history, and there has to be some new laws passed, and I have the willingness of those in power to seize the time of what just happened on how can we better deal with the issue. The police brutality and what has happened has been happening for years and years. And so it is, and I don't have the answer, but there definitely need to be fairness, and the brutality and the injustice is just a little too much. And need laws, but also as individuals and groups really need to keep the pressure on. I think it's on now, and we should work to keep it on for change. It's a civil rights and a human rights issue that we are having.
I think Ms. Lottie was being polite when she said it's a little too much, right? Maman, your hand was raised. Go ahead.
Yes. So I as well don't have all the answers, but one of the things that I do believe in having these conversations is that each person have a piece of an answer. It's like a puzzle, and we're all just trying to fit it together.
Yes.
But going back to what Stephanye was saying, what I said earlier about how can you really serve people who you don't know? You know, like how, like in Hartford, for example, how often are the police officers are actually able to get and engage with the community that they're serving? And then also, I'm very curious to see what are the job description for police officers. Like, what are the requirements for you to get hired as a police officer? Is it more of you're able to, you're able-bodied, or is it more also because being a police officer, you are typically serving such a diverse group of people? So what is your background as a potential officer with diversity? And it's not just, no, my friend is Black, or I have this one person in my classroom who was Hispanic and we got lunch together, but really, what is your actual background when it comes to, diversity? So I'm very curious as to part of the solution being there has to be a requirement, and not just, oh yeah, you need to be okay with diversity or whatever, but it's like, let me see your resume. In what areas throughout your entire life have you actually been, involved in different communities? Because for an officer to just be able to see someone and, George Floyd, to kneel on that man for about 8 to 10 minutes, and then after he was killed, the EMT comes, or the ambulance comes, and they just flip him over like he was nothing. Yeah. Through that entire process, about 12 minutes process total, there has to be some deep hatred and so there's some deep belief that this person in no way matters for you to be able to do that, So I'm very curious as to what the requirements are to be police officer. And I think that's part of the area we need to visit. We need to visit the area of, these are the requirements. And you really can't be a police officer, honestly, if you don't care about human dignity, and you can't answer in an interview, how do you value people? Like one of my core values is I value human beings. Like, it doesn't work that way, because there are different types of human beings as we have constructed society to be.
Absolutely. And again, I think this plays into that whole discussion around leadership, recruitment. We used to have discussions about folks being from our own communities who are recruited to be police officers, and those kinds of discussions have started to go away. So there's a lot to this. Maman, I'm wondering if you had one or two questions that you wanted to ask the panel before we kind of move into the last section.
Yes, so I actually have, you probably have seen me looking that I've been taking notes on my phone. I mean, there's so many things that are brought up to this conversation. And I do agree that this is a starting of a conversation. Like this is just like let's crack the door open a little bit. So one of the things that I've always believed is that things have to really start from the grassroots level, but then also that does not mean that we have to just focus on the grassroots level. And what I mean by that is, for example, I know one of the things I would struggle with in our society is a lot of our Black and brown kids, students, they are academically, they are very far behind. And that leads to socioeconomically and all those things, they just triple over each other. So I know we had a conversation a little bit about leadership, but there's so many different departments, there's so many different institutions that play a role in this systematic oppression. We have school, we have business, we have police, the police system, so all these things. And I guess my big question is, obviously, solving one institution is not going to solve the rest of the problems. So how do we, as a group, as a society, really go on together, not just let's wait until we fix the education system, or let's wait until we fix the police, the reinforcement of officers, but how do we together, how can we go ahead and be able to tackle all those different things, those different institutions together? So that way it's I guess it's a climb as pull as you climb. So we're doing this all together and not just one institution at a time.
So you're talking about a multi-layered approach all at one time. I think that's a great question. Let's get some voices in the room. Open up your mics and just feel free to join in. As long as you don't have a background noise, just unmute yourselves and jump in. What are your thoughts about that? How do we do this from all of these dimensions that need to be addressed at one time?
Well, so I feel, I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. I feel like as far as the police is concerned, I feel like they need some anti-racism training. You know what I mean? When it comes to Black people, I don't know if that means them coming into our communities more, trying to understand us as a culture, but they need something. Because, you know, this situation right here just hits very close to home when it comes to me and my family, because we actually, you know, we're still healing from police brutality right here in New London. A loved one was killed. He wasn't even from this country. He was from the Bahamas, spoke 4 different languages, and got killed within 2 days of being here. So, you know, you talk about anxiety, just having my children walk outside, because this is a community that I have love for, but it's so bittersweet. So I just feel like that money that they're getting, I just seen that they got a whole bunch of grant money and all that funding that needs to be actually distributed to, you know, Black people in the community, to our schools, to education, you know, to get us that higher education in our community to where we can actually get better healthcare. See, this isn't just one topic, it all links to everything, you know what I mean? So that's pretty much what I have to say about that.
Thank you. All the pieces of the puzzle. Miss Regina.
Oh, did I miss something?
No, I was just asking if you had any input around how we solve this from all of these multiple layers at one time.
I hit this.
Regina, did you want to jump in?
Hey,
Miss Lottie, go ahead.
What I wanted to say, just having the opportunity to listen to all that has been said thus far, my brain starts saying that there should be a movement, a steady movement, but just the number who has spoken here speak volumes about the need, and there really need to be what I call a movement, that this coming together, this moment is just a tiny bit, but it's enough that should go full blown. And I don't know how you do it, but you all have good voices, good ideas and experience. And it's time to put all of that in a formal way on how you carry it forth. That's my general feeling based on just listening to you. It's so much work, but that's the work that needs to be done and more.
Really? Thank you so much. And that leads us into really our last thought this evening, which is how do we move forward? Where do we go from here? So I'm actually going to do this and open this up in more of a round robin way. And I'm just going to pick on you one at a time, if you don't mind. And just your final thoughts about how do we move forward? What can you do personally in your families, in your community, and then what can we do collectively to move forward? So Ms. Stephanie, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. So a few things. One, we need to, everyone who is listening on Facebook Live, if you haven't already, make sure you complete your census form, because that will be the predictor of how resources come to Connecticut and then are distributed into our respective communities. So that's number one. Make sure that we're showing up for all of our city council meetings, Board of Ed meetings, and all of the other little committee meetings, because that's where all the decisions are made. And to the question earlier about us doing all of this work together and all these different angles, we all have our different and respective areas of expertise and spheres of influence. So I feel like if we are doing our work in those spaces and then making sure that we come together and like report out and say, okay, this is what's happening here. Like I'm in both public health and philanthropy. So I want to make sure that I'm holding both of those spaces accountable. So if we do that individually and then are working on ways to come together and strategize and do a lot of advocacy work, it's gonna be good.
Right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Ms. Taliah.
I think just as far as being at home with your family, constantly keeping the momentum and the discussion alive, you know, giving that awareness to your kids about health, about, you know, the things that's going on in the community with racism, you know, keeping that whole thing alive and putting a voice to it, doing like a mental check-in with your children and with your family, making sure they're okay. As far as the community, just being an advocate, actually participating, trying to get some laws placed down and get some legislation laws placed down to get changed. I think that's what we can do. And as far as us collectively, constantly keeping these discussions alive, doing what we're doing now and seeing how we all can tap into each other's resources to make our community better.
Fabulous. Maman, go ahead.
I actually have another question that Taliah talking reminded me of. And I know a lot of the parents on here have mentioned about having this conversation with their kids. And it really makes me, because I've been wondering this whole time, is that what is that conversation? What do you say? Only because for the longest, I thought the safety thing to do is like, you know, don't put your hoodie on when you're walking, right? If they stop you, have your hands up, but obviously that doesn't work. So when you're having this conversation with your kids, what do you really say to them?
I'm gonna ask Miss Venice if she can just take like 60 seconds and give a response, because we won't have the time to give a full response, and then come back to the action plan. Go ahead, Venice.
Okay. I would say first you have to look at the cognitive age of your child. So we've had to have different conversations in our household. My 12-year-old, we had a conversation 3 years ago when he was 8, but now the conversation 2 weeks ago was different. So looking at your child to make sure that what you're saying is something that they can actually understand. That's first key. And then two, unfortunately changing with the times, like you said, like conversation when my 12-year-old was 5 was the hoodie. I still see the picture when it comes up on my memory. So looking at your child's age, doing research, reading books. There's a lot of great authors right now who are really exposing our culture to different articles and books to just for our children so that they can understand from a different perspective. I'm past 60 seconds.
Oh, that's all right. Well, why don't you jump in with your thoughts around the action plan moving forward?
I loved when Lottie B said momentum. Absolutely, the momentum, the consistency. We are feeling it right now. We're feeling it right now. And okay, summer's upon us. Back to school. We live in a chaotic world. So it's important to be grounded and centered but keep this consistency with the momentum, collaborating, having these conversations, doing your own healing work too, because we know, I'm going to speak from my own perspective, for me and even for the clients that I serve, is going to take some internal work to do the outside work too, because it could be draining. And we know what it could do to us even when we just deal with our own family stuff. So we're talking about a whole world situation here. So the consistency to keep the momentum going, voting, not just to vote and to say you are voting, but to research the candidates, to research, the off years in which it's time to vote. Look into who you are voting for and encourage others to do the same. And then I would say the psychological testing for our officers and our new officers needs to be revisited. Even those who are already officers, I think it needs to be a yearly check-in, a yearly psychological test, because that's deeply rooted. It's deeply rooted. So for those who are already officers, possibly something that our tax-paying dollars could go to give them additional testing psychologically. And then also for those new officers who are in the academy, if they need to have the same type of psychological testing as the Secret Service, then this is one of the richest countries in the world. We need to figure it out because our people are dying.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Miss Regina.
All right, we're gonna try this again. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because the phone is on mute, the computer's on mute. I don't know what's going on. So there's so many things I want to say, and I'm so mad that my microphone cut off. So definitely we need to start with leadership. I mean, that goes from the people that you vote for, the people that are running. Just like Vernice said, you need to research them on the off season, because when nobody's looking is when they doing all the dirt. So we can't just wait until them signs go up in the lawn. Like, we have to be proactive and know who we're voting for. Like I said in the beginning, holding people accountable. And to what Maman said about how to work on different systems, right? So we, collective Black people, we're not a minority, right? I hate that word minority, because we're not the minority in the United States, right? When you look at us, that's what we're classified as, the minority. But if the majority, which we are, continue with this momentum and we work together, right? Doing them smoke screens and them lights on, like I had talked about yesterday, so that people can't hack necessarily into our systems and prepare for us to come, right? Because that's what they want to do. They want to watch us and see how we moving so that they can prepare for us, so that they can counteract us. So what we got to do is we got to move like them pieces on the chessboard, right? We have to be creative in the way that we're doing things. We can't let everybody know what we're doing and the steps we're taking. We have to let each other know that. So that way we can make them changes, right? And we can change them things so swift and changeable, they won't even know what happened, right? Because they're watching the facade, and they're not paying attention to what's happening in the background. And for so long, we've been oppressed and we've been distracted by the facade that's put in front of us. So we're not paying attention to what's going on in the background. We're not paying attention to the fact that they still holding us down. We get together when one of us is killed, right? And we can't continue to do that. It's just like us individually as a cipher, as our own individual family. Our families don't get together unless somebody dies. Why is that? Right? We got to get together more frequently and more often as a people. I don't care if I don't know you and I just met you yesterday. If you look like me and we have some conversations to be had about how we can make things better for our children, for our Black men, for our Black women, for our mothers who are giving birth and dying, or those babies that are dying, we need to do that, right? We shouldn't be letting these little distractions stand in the way of what we need to do to move forward.
We're all snapping with that one. Miss Seanice.
All right, so I'm going to take it and look at it from just a macro perspective. We did not get where we are today on our own. So we cannot solve it on our own. This needs to come from the top down. There needs to be a whole political change. There needs to be a Black agenda. All of this stems from racism. Black Americans need to start fighting for a specific Black agenda and reparations. It is not a gift, it is a debt owed. And the government created this situation, and the government needs to change it and rectify the situation. We can all do what we can individually within our own small communities, but that will never have systemic change. Systemic change starts when we start to dismantle the system that created it, and that is on the US government. And we need to start holding our politicians accountable, not just voting. We need to make sure that they have an agenda that represents what we need here in this country. We'll be doing this same conversation at the next calling that we have. And we're sick of it. Miss Lottie is 83 years old, she shared with us, and this was going on when she was growing up and before her. These systems that were created were intentional. They're still intentional. And the only thing that will break it down is we need to demand reparations. And every Black American needs to be on board with that. And the other thing that I feel is that Black Americans, we, especially the descendants of slaves, we cannot uplift and help any other group that is also suppressed in this country until we are coming from a position of strength.
Yes.
And right now, what our leaders is doing is trying to help every other group, from immigrants to LGBTQ to other racial groups. And I believe in their struggle. I am with them in the fight, but we do not have any leverage because we don't have strength. And I think our political leaders need to focus on the group that created, that this country has done the most harm to systemically, and that is Black Americans, descendants of slaves. And we all need to be fighting for reparations. And that, I think, is going to be the turn in this country when we start to heal our country from slavery.
Wow.
That's the root.
Thank you.
That's the root.
That is truly the root. It's not a gift, but a debt owed. I love that. Miss Lottie, I'm going to allow you to have almost the final word. Words of wisdom. Your mic's not on, Miss Lottie. There we go. Let me see if I can. There you are.
I want to say that I applaud this whole group who spoke tonight. It gave me feeling hopeful that if you can carry out and carry forth some of the suggestions that you made, we'll go a long ways. And I'm encouraged by the statement, agree with Austin, that the strength that we need strength, we need to get on board with reparation, and we need to be able to have healed from what has been done for the many, many years. And when you look back, we have worked hard and we're still being mistreated. And what got me was what happened in the, I can't come up with the name at the moment, but what is going on, there's brutality all over the place from time to time. And we need to come together and work together and organize and having a plan and then work in the plan. That will help to take us a long ways. And I'm so proud to be here on this panel, but proud more or less, have been hopeful because you younger individuals have so much and it just feels good. And I just say, keep it up. And I hope the group will grow larger and larger, and many voices like you have given tonight, that you will have them also on the same page. We need that.
Thank you so much, Miss Lottie. I'm going to invite in Miss Dyess. If you would unmute yourself, please, and share with us.
What a powerful moment. Not a gift, but a debt owed. I tell you, what a powerful, I mean, that is truly the testament. But I just wanted to share, when we came together just now, the first thing that Stephanye said, you know, at this moment, I'm okay. And to share that so many of us had all these different emotions, and I appreciate sharing that. Sometimes I'm crying, I'm sad, I'm full of rage, numbness, but then I have those moments when I hear those positive things that I feel that happiness and joy. But what I was really impressed by, that the time is now for change, because some of you ladies are inspired by your children, because the Zen Z are bold, fierce, unapologetic Black, and that right there, just, it is such powerful moment when we take time. And that's what you guys share, that you take time with your children, that you're sharing with them, you're having these conversations. And that's what it's all about, having a conversation of what's going on now and making sure is what they're able to handle at this time, but being direct with them. And for the ones that share that, you know what, I have adults now, so we can really have this conversation about change. So the one thing is looking at the bigger picture. So we got to think about how everything right now is set up for our children and ourselves and our families to fail, from the health system, from the housing, and then from housing, healthcare, jobs. We have to look at that. And it is about working together to make change. So one of the things that I was so glad is about collecting that data, making sure we document it so we can have change, and making sure this is something that I thought was important, because I am about youth involvement. So I love the fact, you know what, having the youth involved to co-design the changes in the community that need to happen, and them having that safe space where they can share about what needs to happen in our community. But one of the things that is very important for us to know, making sure that we're going to count everyone with the census, making sure that you're submitting that information. When we talk about voting, register and vote, but also I'm going to say, you guys better get up and start running as well. And then when you want to hold people accountable, but you also want to make sure when they step up and they make decisions and it's in the best interest of people of color or the best interest for our city, you make sure you got their back. They are up there representing you. You need to make sure that they know that, you know what, wait a minute, they stood up for me. Let me make sure that they know we appreciate that. And I'm going to share with them some other things that will be helpful to us in our community. I just want to say, you ladies, I am so glad that you opened up your heart and shared your experience, your knowledge. And I am so honored to be sitting here to have the opportunity to hear the words that you share, but not only the words, the actions in your walk, because I know many of you, and I know your walk is powerful. So thank you for allowing me what you shared with me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dyess. And I would like to add my thanks and appreciation to each of you on the panel. Myself, I hope and pray that we make a commitment to get together again. There has been so much that's been said this evening, and some things that stand out for me around the fact that as Black women, we have always been strong and had to stand strong. This has been a breaking point for many of us, but it's a good breaking. It's a movement to action. Some of us have been doing this for some time, but it's a new fervor. It's a new hope. It's a new sense of empowerment, and we're standing up together. And I'm just so grateful and proud to be a part of it with you. What sticks to me is that idea from Stephanye around us all being involved on every level with every decision that gets made by us, about us, and for us, that we're included in every single layer of that's important, that we work together collaboratively, that we continue these discussions, that we work. I love the working in silence piece. Working in silence, but we continue this dialogue. and now young people who are stepping up. We have to support that in any and every way that we can. We have a responsibility to be behind them. We have a responsibility to also lead them and give them more strength and energy. And that comes from you and all of those of you who are out here who are watching and listening. Please go to census.gov. Let's get those registrations in. We haven't even touched on Black business today, but register your Black businesses if you're in Connecticut at bbusinessalliance.org. That's the Black Business Alliance. Let's get the list together. Let's know who we are. Let's buy Black, support Black. Let's have our own agenda, as you brought up today. That's how we dismantle this thing from the top down. Thank you all so much for your energy today. I'm going to invite Kevin Booker to come back in. He's the one who brought us together this evening. It has been just a privilege and an honor. Kevin.
I just want to thank you, all of you phenomenal women, for such a great conversation. Give yourselves a round of applause. It was phenomenal. Wow. And special thanks to the moderator, Anne-Marie.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Night, yes.
You're so welcome.
My gosh. And also I want to thank Reona Dyess for her closing remarks. Did a phenomenal job. Thank you. And thank you to all the listeners who just tuned in tonight. Thank you so much for the support. We appreciate you all. And Anne-Marie, can you just close us off with prayer? Greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Discussion.
Our Heavenly Father, we are just so grateful for your presence this evening. And we're so grateful, Lord, because we know that you're in all and above all, even in this challenging time. Even through COVID, even through the violence, you have never left our side, and we are just truly grateful for your presence, Lord. We thank you for the hope that you've given us. We thank you for the energy and the strength of the young people who are stepping forward. We thank you, Lord, because we know change is coming. We just appreciate you. We love you. We honor you this evening. We worship you, Lord, and we just thank you for bringing us together at this time, in this moment, to make change that will last for generations. We give you honor and glory. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everyone. Love you all.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you. I'm looking forward to talking to you again.
Bye.
Hi, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.